Okie dokie. Welcome everyone to this week's Q&A and the Soils Week. People got a few questions. So, you know the drill. Got a hand up. Let's do it. Again, my apologies for being a bit late this morning. I was answering a long question, and as sometimes happens when I do that, I probably shouldn't do it right before I've got a webinar because I can get a bit lost when I'm answering questions sometimes. So I'm typing them out. Anyway, if anyone's got a question, we've got Ben. Thank you. Good morning, Ben.
Morning.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How you going?
Good.
Welcome back to Bendigo.
Thank you. You've been following me getting about.
Did the course go well?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. There was a good crew, and I think that the site was it probably wasn't the best site to run the kind of course that we did, because there wasn't a lot of variations of the kinds of forestry that I would have liked to have worked with, like in practice. But there was a good, Ulrico is developing a really nice, what he calls successional agroforestry setup, as opposed to a syntropic, but it's more or less the same, follows the same principles. So that was really good to be inside of that and have a bit of a play. But yeah, it was a good program, good crew. So happy to go there. And then had a couple of days at another client's, and then another one I went to yesterday, who I had a meeting with on the phone, an online meeting with about 3 years ago when he bought the property, and I put him in a few directions with this 1 or 2 hour phone meeting, and he rang me up and said, "Oh, can you come out?" And I didn't recognize him or anything because it was a phone meeting, of course. And then he started referring to when I told him this and when I told him that, and I said, "When did I tell you this stuff?" So that was pretty funny. But yeah, he's doing really well, and I thought that was I said to Lisa, that was like a tune-up. So yeah, that was good.
Very good.
Yeah, he was cooking along very nicely. And I think he's going to mince all of his cows. Well, not all of them, but the ones that he produces, because he's having a lot of difficulty getting good finishing quality. So anyway, so I said, turn them into mince and feed them to people who can't afford grass-finished beef because everyone's trying to charge too much. So yeah, I think he'll do that. Anyway, especially in Byron Bay, everyone charges an arm and a leg there. Crikey.
Yeah, well, I've found out there's some people who produce food apparently in Byron Bay and label it as Byron Bay isn't actually.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, it's a really big bay, Byron Bay, isn't it?
Yeah, it extends all the way down to Sydney, I think.
Yeah, and perhaps out to Dubbo.
Yeah.
Anyway, I also went to the farm. I've driven past a lot of times, but I finally went to it, and I'm going to write a little report that I'll put into the agrarians workplace. So I had Charlie Arnott, who some people would know. He reached out to us last week and said, "Oh, you're going to be up there. Can we have an interview?" So we had an interview with him, and I had a walk around the farm and spent most of my time shaking my head, thinking, "What the."
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was pretty disappointing, really. Yeah. Anyway,
heard a fair bit about it, but yeah, never. We don't spend a lot of time down there, so yeah.
Yeah, no, it's for such a great position. It's one of those places where it's got everything, and yet they just. I mean, I would say, yeah, at like 2 out of 10.
Do you think that's like lack of planning or lack of?
It's like it's
direction.
It's like a petting zoo, to be honest, with the animals, and then so I don't know. I didn't. I said to Charlie when we met, I said to him, "Oh yeah, I've looked here. It looks pretty average, blah blah." And then he said to me, "Oh yeah, I consulted here a couple I consult here every month. And I went, oh, right. Okay, I won't go too hard, but I'm going to. I mean, I think it's important that there's things said, because it's such. I mean, people go there. 1,000 people go there every day.
Yeah.
Right, and that's 1,000 people who are having some impression of what this place is being made out to be, and it's so low in it's a 2 out of 10 in terms of what it could be. Or just about the horticulture's pretty crap. Like the vegetable production system on those soils is, I mean, yeah, it was pretty frustrating walking around. The only system that I saw that was half reasonable was the so-called permaculture system, which was ostensibly a bananas interplanted with what do you call them, papayas, and then a variety of perennial leaf crops, more or less in between, all in a sort of a very organised sort of layout. Yeah, that seemed to be okay, but everything else, it was really unimpressive. The restaurants and the bakery and all that sort of stuff, really good, top notch. But which I think is, if you look at the average punter that goes in there, they don't know anything about agriculture, but they do know what a good restaurant is, and they do know what a good coffee is. And so if they weren't to impress on that front, then the reputation of the place would be good. But you can go out and you see a couple of pigs in a wallow, and it's like, that's a farm. That's a farm, and
name right.
and there's some Scottish Highland cows off in the distance. Oh, right, and they're free range and they're on grass, which is only 2 inches high. And then there's a chicken caravan. It's like, oh well, everything's good in the world. Good-o. Yeah. Anyway, I'll show some photos and we can have a look at it. And I'm going to write. Well, Lisa said to me, you should write to the owners, because I think it's just a misrepresentation of what they're. Well, it just puts a bad story out there, I think. Anyway, that's not what you're calling about, so let me know about your beacon of regenerative agriculture up there.
Yeah. I've got a question about earthworks and doing major works on a property and how it relates to soils and succession and rebooting, I guess.
Okay.
Like we're putting in a driveway, as you know, and we're going to redo the orchard and whatnot. We're going to turn up a lot of soil, and we're going to have a lot of subsoil exposed. Place is going to look like a mess because there's a big machinery coming in. And over the years, I've sort of seen people establishing food forests and planting out swales and bare earth systems into food forests and that sort of thing. And we're not specifically looking at food forests, although that idea of kind of guilds, it's always in my mind, and I'm trying to achieve things away from monocultures.
Sure.
But I guess I'm looking for advice or things to consider once the machinery goes, and you've got your plan. Like, I know where the trees are going to go, but you've got all bare earth that's been inverted and things exposed and rocks and what have you. And I'm already preparing for that in terms of nursery stock, in terms of having trees to put in. But in terms of ground covers and seeding and mulching, and I know in this climate, it can go pretty quickly back to that perennial grasses, the heavy sort of weedy grasses, guinea grass and stuff, which can be great for biomass, or leave them in certain parts. And 6 foot of guinea grass is great mulch when you cut it. But we've got a lot of undesirable. We've got a very high seed load in the soil of undesirables, if you know what I mean. Rat's tail and cobbler's pig, probably not too bad. They're showing signs in the soil. I'm aware of that as sort of indicators. But like what you've just pulled up there, like we're going to be dealing with something like that. Yeah,
well, that's why I pulled it up, because.
Yeah. And then how to approach that in terms of scale and.
Well, it's being prepared. it's like everything, you know. It's sort of like I liken earthworks to the world to to geomorphological processes being sped up
Yeah, yeah,
in
totally.
at warp speed,
Yeah,
and so you've got to be really well to do all of the things that you're saying you want to achieve. You've got to be well prepared. So
yeah,
yes, it's great having all of the it's great having all of that seed stock and blah blah, all of that ready. But the biggest thing I want to see ready is mulch,
yeah,
and so rolls and rolls of it. You know, according to what you think you need, and you might want to test that. So for this particular project, for example, that you see before you, I did have them in proper sequence, like looking at the same spot in
mm,
order. But anyway, doesn't matter. Um, what we did here was we did this channel, which was a water conservation channel, to go through to this dam at the end here,
mm-hmm,
which was just never filled up. So we extended its catchment by running this pretty flat-based channel, about 500 meters to connect to a road going in an opposite direction. So one of those things. But we did it in a way, in this case, so that you could basically drive through it. It wasn't going to be,
it's not a
as you can
road
see,
road.
yeah, you could run through here across it pretty nicely,
Yeah,
as opposed to having these really, like you can see, that's a nice 2-to-1 batter there, 2-to-1 batter there, and
yeah,
the embankments. So the water, most of the water is being carried across here, you know, just in that little
yeah,
box
yeah.
there. So like that lip there, where it's a bit loose dirt, it'd be about 8 inches deep. So anyway, so that was the purpose. Smooth it off. The other part of it too, as best you can with the machinery that you have and the budget that you have, because the more fluffing around you do with topsoil and stuff, the dollars just disappear.
Mm.
So
As in stockpiling it and trying to put it back.
yeah, well, I think putting it back is really useful. Like they'll be able to do it quicker than you would, but
Mm.
stockpiling the topsoil and generally that happens along a windrow. So if you're doing like linear work like this with a grader, and even with an excavator, they'll come along and they'll strip that soil and they'll put it along the sides outside of the working area,
Mm.
and then that's ready then to be used to cover it back up again, which is basically what we did here with what we had. I should have another photo here somewhere, but anyway, we did that, and then we covered the whole thing with mulch. And in this case, I just used some round bales of weather damaged hay, and
Mm.
I threw a bit of I threw a bit of a mix of local grasses in it. I mean, we can buy around here. You can go to the produce store and buy what they generally call a dam mix or a
Yeah,
general pasture mix, and I just threw that on,
yeah.
and then it rained, and well, hey presto, there you go. So
You throw that, like we mulch really heavily when we do mulch because we're doing it directly under trees. But if you're mulching broader areas,
you don't need much at all. I mean, in this case, I can't remember how much it was. Basically, that, you know, when you get a round bale and you just roll it out, it
yeah,
was basically the thickness of the round bale as it rolled out.
yeah,
But I
okay.
think you can definitely go lower, as you would have seen. Um, a bit of bare ground, and then you'll have a bit of bare ground, and there'll be a bit of debris or accumulated mulch that just happens to appear on it, and it might only be half an inch thick, and vegetation appears out of it,
Yeah,
even though underneath has been scraped and glazed. Vegetation with just a little bit of debris will establish with a bit of mulch. So
mm.
you don't need a lot, but obviously, I mean, in this case, it was probably an inch thick. I would say maybe an inch and a half, but by the time it compacted down or bedded down, it was probably an inch, and that was all that was needed. And obviously, at the base of this, I mean, we scraped that. That's hard. I mean, we ran along and
Yeah.
compacted it because we want it to run. And this was relatively compacted.
The grass
Um,
will still get its roots in there though.
grass doesn't need much.
Yeah,
Um, it'll get its roots in. It'll find resistance, but yeah, it just won't grow as well as it does out in the paddock, where, you know, we want this to be compacted, but we
mm.
want it to be covered. So yeah, depends on your own objective. So with gutters and that sort of thing, I generally want them to be hardened underneath so that they run. But I want them to be covered so that they
On a road.
so they don't erode and that I don't get sediment transfer.
Yeah.
So,
and the grass seed that you're putting out, you're putting that on like with a like an even spread or a something on top of the mulch.
no, I just threw it up on top. It was a pretty loose. It was a pretty loose. I mean, you can imagine. You just roll it out and make sure. Well, for me, I'm a bit anal, so I make sure it's fairly neat and overlapping and blah blah. Because I do that because then you get a really nice result like that. I mean, that looks beautiful to me.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and you get that by a little bit of extra attention. It also means, especially in the bottom channel, that we don't want little dams of mulch because I want this to run. I mean, this is on a 1 in 304, which is pretty gentle. So you don't need to have little dams in the way to undermine what you're trying to do. But yeah, we just hand distributed it. The other thing is I haven't got one of those little spinner things, but if I had one of those seed spreader, like little handheld ones that you run along like a moolie. One of those would be great because you can get a really even distribution. But no, we just did this by hand. And the other thing is using grass hay. We got the volunteers that came up out of that. But that's completely mowable too, which is another part of this. And that's something a lot of people don't do with their gutters, is make them so that they can maintain.
Well, you got access every direction over that. You can drive over it anyway.
We did it so you could drive along it, like lengthways. But yeah, you can drive through this.
You can go across, no problems. You're not going to.
Yeah. No, it worked out really well. So Hannah's aided in the filling of that dam that never bloody filled. So, but yeah, just being prepared with that sort of thing. Getting back to your question, having the seedlings, but coverage with mulch, I find, and also if you've got a quad or something like that, getting a bit of reinforcing mesh, like concrete mesh, and just banging a couple of tires on that or something, or a couple of logs or whatever, and use that as a smudging bar. I didn't do this in this case, but I could have, and it would have probably made an even better result. Like on the soil itself,
just get it even.
Yeah, because you can you can get them on bobcats and all that sort of thing, or skid steers. But you can just. I like the reinforcing mesh, because if you put, like, say, if you have what do they come in, 3.6 meter lengths, you drag that along on its full length. And you put a tire at sort of each meter, then it will sort of meld to the shape of what the main shape is, like. Where if it's rigid, it'll start cutting corners. So you want something that'll actually run along and rake the whole shape as you've created it, as opposed to form a new shape, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, dragging that width is going to be a pretty quick way of doing it too.
Oh, absolutely, and it makes it
with a solid spreader on a posi track is going to take you forever and leave it.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and that's it. Well, they're designed for contractors who are charging by the hour, so of course, it's not about productivity. But a bit of rebar works really nicely, and that just smudges. As you can imagine, if you look at that. If I had have done that, we basically cleaned that up with rakes, so which takes forever. Does the best job, but because you can take out any of these square edges that you get with a blade, little bits like that, for example. Anyway, just details, but any detail takes time and your time and money. So
I've noticed around here, like I've been looking around on the roads, and it seems anywhere where there's a batter that is about 1-to-1 and has exposed the subsoil, as in like they haven't put any topsoil back on, seems to have a hard time. It'll partially establish grasses, but you'll always get bare soil. Whereas we're 2-to-1, you can get pasture, effectively.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I think I would have probably said that the other day when we were looking at Taranaki Farms example of their road. Where's that? So, gradient roads. I've got that probably in access. I've got anything there. What have we got? I know I had it in the. I don't think I have. I had it in the presentation, but there were sections of the road that was built at Taranaki where the road had. I'll just go to here. It's probably the best place. Where's my access one? But there's sections along there that I said go back and trim it back to 1:1 or 2:1, and it didn't happen. And of course, nothing grew. So
Yes.
you've got these little 45s. It's a really good point, and I think that a lot of people, it's again these little details that people forget to do or don't do, and it really catches up with you, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think you'd get away with it here if you could mulch it quickly.
Yeah.
And you'd get something established. But with the red subsoil, little bits of quartz and ironstone and stuff in it, that's the problem. I've been meaning to put a post up in the access of our driveway issue. Interesting. The erosion that's happening out on the road is pretty horrendous, and council aren't really interested in doing anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many different things. It probably wouldn't hurt for you to workshop it through in the workplace in the access page.
Yeah.
Take some photos, strategic photos, and we can work through it because obviously that's the best way. But here's that photo I was talking about. You can see here on this edge here, see how that's nicely laid back to a 2:1.
Yeah.
And then here it's closer to a 1:1.
Yeah.
And that's like 8. Well, that's what? That's 6 years in a pretty humid, non-brittle area, and yet still it hasn't established. So, yeah, it just goes to show. And every area, I do encourage people to look at the batters that are around them to see what slopes you require, and that's also going to change according to whether it's east facing or which aspect it's got. So, a south or east facing in the southern hemisphere may well you could have a less gentle batter than you might in the same area with a western and a west facing or north facing batter. So there's going to be those nuances that sort of come into that as well. But it would be good to see your roads and what you're facing. But otherwise, I don't know if we got through your question. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's just it's sort of confirmed what I was suspecting.
But see if you can get some good grass hay. Just be careful on that broadly. I mean, it's always the thing, can you get organic? Because a lot of people use or get when I say organic, get organic by default or by neglect as well, hey?
Yeah.
But of course, when you bring that in, you've got whatever comes with it. But some places, if you get like from proper hay making places, they do use a lot of chemistry, which can be a bit iffy in terms of microbe development later on. So just be careful on that one.
Yeah. Good one.
Groovy.
Thanks, mate.
No worries. We might hear from you later as well.
Yeah,
Never know. Take care. All right. Jason Patterson, allowed to talk. There you are, mate.
Morning, Darren. How you going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Hey, I just wanted to talk about...
Sorry, just before, you're to blame for me being late this morning because I'm here writing this reply to you about about threaded tees and joiners and all of that. So.
Oh, right. Because, Ben put that up about the coupling that you could put in.
Yeah.
And from what you were showing me about the threaded tees, I don't think the coupling will work with the quick connections on and off.
Yeah. They will. The problem I have with the saddles, I really like them. It's just that they're just not as solid. So the other thing is generally too, and I was looking at this morning, and we might be able to see this differently. I know this is a diversion from your question, but I was looking this morning at because I've got my local Midland irrigation. I went through the whole joint and looked at took their prices, because I find it really helpful.
Oh, definitely.
When I'm pricing, so I just took a photo of every bit that they had in the shop. And I was looking at tapping saddles this morning, and it reminded me that if you've got a 2-inch, then I don't think you're like here. That's an 1.5 inches,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes 1.5 inches to 25 female. So it's basically a reducing saddle. So you don't go 1.5 inches to 1.5 inches. You go 1.5 inches to 25 or something like that. I'm not sure that that's absolutely accurate, what I'm saying there. Whereas when you've got a threaded tee like this one here, that's a 2-inch rural, and that's a 2-inch or 50 mil female. So you don't get any reduction in size, which is good. So something to consider. But you do pay a lot more, as I just showed. I actually wrote it down. You pay for a 2-inch saddle, which would then go out to a 25 mil thread. You'll pay $26, whereas a 2-inch threaded tee, you're looking at about $65. So yeah, so it's a big jump. But it's volume is everything in this game. That's the thing. So
I understand that, and it's going to last a long time.
Yeah, that's right, and it's super robust. A properly fitted compression fitting will be there for forever, effectively, especially being underground.
Well, my question is along those lines, because my first question was just trying to understand how I put those threaded tees on as I'm laying the pipe.
Yeah, right. Well, I've just written a whole bloody lot. Thanks very much.
But,
that's all right. I can do it. Look, generally what I'll do is I'll put here, the first thing I'll do is I'll rip the line as many times as it takes to get down to the depth.
Cool.
Because it makes it a lot harder if you go in and rip it while you're laying and it hasn't been ripped before. You sort of, am I on the right line? You're sort of paying attention to too many things when you should be paying attention to just laying the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So going along and ripping the line, it makes it easy for you to follow, because you just center the tractor and off you go. But you know that you've hit any rock, and you can go in and clean some of that up and replace it with a bit of clean fill, because these are some of the things that you don't want to happen. I mean, you can lay in rock, but especially with poly, because most poly is pretty thick walled these days.
Yeah, but
it's ideal not to, but you will find that rock if you go and rip it, right? And if
I'm going to find the rock, it's there. I know already.
Yeah.
So,
that's the first thing. Secondly is if I've got, if I'm doing threaded tees are a lot different to a tee. So, because when you've got a tee that you're putting in, you've got to cut the end of that or you've got to cut the ends clean so that you can put them into the compression fitting up to the specified end.
Yes.
Right? So there's all of that. So I will generally, if I'm going to be using tees, I'll lay the pipe that's going to be connected to the tee, like as opposed. So you've got the main line, which will have two ends connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you've got a joiner.
Yep.
And then when you've got the tee, I will prefer to lay that pipe first, right? Because then when you lay the main length, you might leave a meter extra on that length that you're connecting to, or you're connecting to the main. You may leave a meter and then go and lay your main, because what will happen then is as you drive past the laid length, the ripper will just run past it and it'll just flick out of the way and then flick back again. And then you'll be cutting back when you go and fit the tee on. You'll be cutting that length back anyway we'll cut the working end back to where you fit it onto the tee. there'll be a bit of digging. That's just the way it is. You can't. I mean, I have in the past.
So I'm getting a bit lost here.
Yeah. So say
we've got the one main line that goes through.
Yeah, it's probably easier if I draw it on the screen. How about that? Let's do that. Where's my thingy? There it is. Right. So, sorry, I don't have any drawings of any of this, and I'll just get a. There's a blank page. Okay, when you're ready, there we go. Okay. So, and just get this fella up. View colors. There we are.
Right.
Right. Can you see?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you've got a pipe going this way, and you want to join this one to there, right? So in there is going to be the threaded, is going to be the T, okay? Not the threaded T, the T.
This is just a T, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this is just a T. So with that, I'm just going, yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay this one first, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to lay this one second. Now, when you drive through here, and say you've got about a metre of length, extra length here,
Gotcha.
the T is going to go right here.
That's correct, yeah.
Right, the T is going to go there, right? So you leave a bit of working end on that and then lay that. So lay that first, leave yourself about a metre of extra length or whatever, and then drive through on this one, right? And when you go past here, it's going to flick. The ripper's going to touch the end of this, but it's not going to matter.
No,
right?
that's fine.
Because you'll cut that back, because the piece, you're going to cut it back to sort of here, right? Because that's going to be the bit that you join in. So you'll just discard that bit, right? That's a bit easier than putting this pipe in first and then driving this way and then having to lift the ripper out of the ground. You're going to have to dig a whole bit of dirt back through here to get it down to the depth, if you follow.
Yes, I do totally. Thank you.
Yeah. So that will save, because you're going to be driving. You've got a pipe laid here, and you've got your ripper coming along sort of here like that with the pipe layer on behind it, right, like that.
Yep.
And you're going to have to stop and lift that ripper up well before then, which means that this pipe is going to be up, maybe a foot higher, close to the surface, and then you've got to dig all of this ground back, which is a pain in the ass. So, yeah.
Okay, that's cool, and I understand it'll be right up the end of my property when I come to the end of the ridge and to go across, no problem at all. But as I'm going along this main line, and I've got my paddocks all split up, I was talking to Laura from Kiwi Tech, and I'm trying to work out how big my paddocks are, and I've done a bit more work on that. And
that's good.
Per square metre, which isn't much. It's like the 100 grams per square metre. But so,
is that what you're producing? 100 grams per square metre at the moment?
Well, we haven't got a lot of rain here.
Yeah, that's okay. But I mean, it's still early days. So I would say to that, look, it's always a challenge to design around the worst case scenario, which is about what you've got. And as I think I've said to you before, you should be building a bit of capacity into the system. So in terms of paddock sizes, so maybe work through what some of Laura's advice has been so that I can unravel that a bit.
Yeah, so I've worked the paddock size. I've worked it down to an acre per paddock, and I did the small calculations. I could get about 20 head per acre if we moved them every day, and I can get about 74 paddocks. A couple of those are the larger paddocks in the forestry. But what Laura pointed out to me was, when I'm going along that main line and putting in my T sections that I'm going to connect my trough to, that trough line shouldn't be very long. It should only be about 8 metres. She said that the longer you have it, you have to realise that sun's going to heat that water up.
Yep.
So if that's the case, then my understanding is that I'm laying a T intersection with a screw cap for the trough, probably about every 16 meters.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
I agree to an extent, but if you've got a big enough trough, which is the other part of this, see,
100 litre I'm going to go for.
yeah, I agree with Laura that, yeah, you will get heating, but there's a couple of parts to that. One is we use white dairy hose, right? So white obviously doesn't absorb as much heat as a black pipe will. So there's that. Two is we tend to find that along fence lines and along that you tend to get longer grass than you do along out in the paddock. And the reason for that is because you get condensation collecting on the fence. And the fence is basically a drip line, right? And so you tend to get, that's one of the reasons why you tend to get more grass growing on a fence line than you don't otherwise. It's not because animals are avoiding it. It's because the fence actually collects dew, right? And
even the electric fence, even the little two-string?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Everything does. Any solid surface will collect something.
Yeah, okay.
And that all adds to the precipitation that's available to the vegetation. So anyway, I think that I wouldn't be too, because otherwise, if you're having to put a saddle every 16 meters, that just sounds ridiculous to me.
It is. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and the other part of it too, and I think I'd be interested to talk to Laura about this. See, with Kiwi-Tech have their trough systems are really small, or their troughs are small, and so the water that comes into the troughs is like, if I've got 100 litre trough, which is a tiny trough in the scheme of troughs. See, their systems work because of their grazing, their techno grazing system. Their techno grazing system is working on really small mobs or relatively small mobs, and so you need a relatively small trough. And so, whereas when you've got, what we tend to do as an alternative is fill say a 400 or 500 litre trough up, and so that you've got all of that bulk of water there, and of course then that's going to be there for hours, and if the water's warmer, then it'll cool down to ambient temperature, right? So therefore, we don't find that to be as big a problem as they might when you've got a smaller trough size. So if I had a smaller trough, like their little ones that they have, they're micros. They're micros. They're instant. So of course, if the pipe heats up, then it's going to heat up straight away.
In regards to that, and you're saying the white dairy line, more flexible hose that I'm going to connect to the T-joiner and then to the trough. What size line do you reckon I could go for that? Like 20 meters, 50 meters? Because that's going to be...
I generally, like I said, I generally will go for, like if I'm buying 2-inch pipe, 2-inch pipe generally comes in a 50 or 100 meter length.
Yes.
Right? So I tend to go with 100 meters, and then I'll have a 50, and therefore I'll have a threaded T every 100 meters, which means I then have a 50 meter length of the white dairy hose.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. I'll be able to put that into my fencing and water plan for you. Okay.
Yeah, and so that reduces the cost considerably. If you find that that's not working for you, and this is where we start. We start with a system that is as best as we can do it. And if you find that doesn't work with you, well, then you can come along and cut the pipe and go to 50 meters. Yeah. Okay. Right. But yeah, I would go with that to start with, and yeah.
And the accessibility of the dairy pipe that you.
It's just there. It's called dairy washdown hose. It comes in. You just go to your. I might even have a photo of it here. The pipe.
And is it 2 inches? Is it or?
No, it's usually. I don't know. No, that's not it. I don't have a photo of it here. I've probably got some in a presentation somewhere. So that's the other thing too. You can use lay flat as well. Some people use lay flat.
Oh yeah, no, aluminium coupling or whatever. Yeah.
Yep, and but if you're going to go with that, then you're probably better off going with a cam lock fitting and going that way.
Yes.
Which will, but then if you go that way, then it'll be more expensive at the valve end because you'll be playing with all of this sort of stuff, and then you'll be looking at what kind of. So so here in this case that's a 3/4.
Mm-hmm. Offer too.
Off it, and you can see here they've just used a Nilex garden hose fitting in this case as a starting point. This one here, oh yeah, that's the dairy hose.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's usually inch.
All right, so reduce it down to an inch.
So that's just inland from Newcastle, which is not a cool climate, and that's fine. They've got one of these every. I think they've got 50s on this one. Not 50-meter spacings, but they've just got the stab-in fitting. I personally look, they're okay as a starting point. They're certainly cheaper. This sort of Iplex coupling here, but they're not super robust.
Yeah, I can see that breaking in 5 years or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so, whereas going with cam lock, I mean, personally, what we've got is a cam lock with a brass gate valve. You're talking about some money there, but you'll never have to do anything to it ever again. It'll just work forever. I mean, obviously, you might have to reseat the valve or whatever, but you've got something that's completely you can do maintenance to.
Yeah,
but it'll be super robust forever.
And then just quickly, Darren, to going back while I'm laying, so I go through, rip a few times, make sure I got it all right. There's two parts to this question. Do you think a 45 horsepower Kyoto tractor would be able to rip through a little bit?
Yeah, it should be fine. Again, going a couple of times, it might just take a couple of times.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be, even if you, like I tell you some tricks there. If you've got the time, rip it. Yeah, well, rip your lines, let it rain a little bit. Like if it's hard, just rip as deep as you can on the first go, and that'll ostensibly scarify it, and that'll weaken that line. So what'll happen then, you get a bit of rain, the water will go into that rip line, and then come back, a few days after the rain's gone and rip it again. And then, because the water will weaken the ground, and it'll make it a lot easier for you. And you'll just have to wait for it. So you might, like, if you knew half an inch was coming, you might get out there and rip a couple of days before. Then you get your rain, wait a couple of days, and then rip it again. And then you should be down to your depth, because I think where you are, you should be only looking at 30 or 40 centimetres of depth will be plenty.
Fair enough. Yeah. So then I've ripped, and I'm going back through, and I'm pulling up the pipe at the places where I need to put my joiners.
Yep.
Is it possible, could I go through and auger a few holes before I rip through?
I don't see any reason why not.
And just follow that along the rip line?
Yeah, just if you've got someone helping you. See, sometimes what I'll do is I'll lift the pipe. When I'm getting to the end, I'll lift it a little bit so that I don't have to dig if I'm being lazy. But there's nothing stopping you. There's two ways. Like, it's probable that when you do your ripping with the kind of implement that you'll do, you won't be able to fit the fittings on.
No.
Right. So, like Jason Hagen, for example, with his pipe layer, that pipe layer, I've got a photo of it here. Pipe layer. Here we go. So that's a pretty conventional pipe layer, right? I've mounted this onto the back of a yeoman's plough, and that's a 45 horsepower tractor, right?
Okay.
So just to give you this is like Jason Hagen's. He's got I can't remember the brand now, a Delmade. So the Delmade has got a much bigger tube, so he can lay a tube, a 3-inch metric pipe with its fitting on.
Wow.
Right. But yeah, that's a $7,000, $8,000 bit of kit, and that's the pipe roller. Right?
Yeah.
So you're going to have to physically. I'd say with you'll probably roll the pipe out physically.
Yep.
And that's always fun. and especially with 2-inch, and then you'll run, you'll run it through here. What you'll do is you can lift it up, but I think you're probably better off with your climate, just marking out where the ends are, and you'll just have to make sure that, again, you've got a half a metre to a metre of extra length on each one, so that when you put the fitting in, because you'll have to dig in down to that depth, won't be too bad because it'll be loose from the ripping, and you dig down to your depth and then fit the fitting on.
And then I'm thinking about using old plasterers' buckets to keep that hole.
Yeah, and that's where you come along and be creative, and maybe cut a couple of rebates on either side.
Yeah.
Put it over. Yeah. You're on with it. Yeah, that'll be.
Thank you very much, Darren. Appreciate it, mate.
No worries. That's what we're here for, mate. That's what you pay the big bucks for.
Right on.
Good on you. Okie dokie. Okay, Ray and Samantha. Good morning. Ray and Samantha. Calling all Rays and Samanthas. No, not quite there. Anybody else there? We've got. Oh, there we are. Hello, in the distance.
Have you got us?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
It started off as a rumor.
No, we are here, definitely.
Good.
So I have a very general question.
Yes.
For you this morning, Darren. Do you have any examples that you've seen of a multi-enterprise farm that works successfully financially and doesn't require multitudes of people to run it?
I think we made a film about one, but it took about.
They have an army.
It took about 50 years for them to get there.
Yeah, they have an army to run that too.
That's right, and it is an army, and I think they are generals, and and they've got all the kind of protocols that it takes. Look, I've been fresh in the middle of this for the last week because the consultancy that I did on Monday and Tuesday this week, and as I said to start with, I went to the farm and blah blah blah. I mean, it's really bloody hard. So no, everyone I see, everyone that I see that's working has got a long intergenerational history. I think that's the key, and that they are intergenerational projects as well. And so therefore what I mean is that, let's say, to put you in your picture, let's say it was to work for you, well then your kids would be young adults or adults, and they would be effectively the colonels, because it is, I mean, you're basically developing a military hierarchy to make it work. And I think the other part of it, which is a really strong part of it, is that everyone needs to be incentivized somehow, either by blood and equity, that kind of equity, or some other form of incentivization. Because, look, they're just really, people want to do it, and obviously they look at a polyface example or whatever, and that does it. But I'll go back to another part of that, Samantha, and that's where we look at, just how many enterprises are we talking? So if you look at Polyface, I think Polyface has got about 9 or 10 enterprises that they're running, individual livestock forms of livestock, and vegetables and forestry and retail, and all of that, or each one of those being an enterprise. As opposed to a classic mixed farm, where the classic mixed farm might have 2 or 3 different enterprises. Sheep, wheat. Well, sheep, wheat, barley, various cereal crops. But there's usually only one, maybe two animals. Like the traditional Australian farm for a long time had, as enterprises, had a cereal or a let's say plant crop of whatever kind, a omnivore to clean up stuff of the crop, like a pig or a chicken or something, and then a herbivore to clean the ground, to keep the place tidy. So, and use up the grass. So that's a pretty traditional system, and people would seem to be able to cope with that. But by the same token, they were all going through commodity value chains too. And that's the other question about this, is that people in this space, again, they see the polyface thing and they try and service every leg of the value chain chair. So they're not only producer, they're processor, the logistics, and their marketing. And so that's something that the old characters never had to do. They were still in the commodity chain, so they were just selling at the farm gate. So yeah, that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's actually a really simple and effective template. One plant, one omnivore, or one plant type, one omnivore, one herbivore. I like that. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, it is basically what it was. I mean, that was our farm. Although we had two omnivores, we had pigs and we had chickens. Because my nana loved the cash flow that came from layers. And so it just seemed to her, because all of the other crops that we had were, or all of the other, we grew sheep and we grew some cattle, but, depending on what the prices were at the time. And so they were not a constant cash flow, just as same with crops. Crops aren't a constant cash flow, but eggs were, and pigs weren't a constant cash flow. But the pigs, we only had, I think we had about 3 boars and about 8 sows or something, so it was a small operation. But a friend of ours in the Wimmera, up until the industrialisation of pigs, he had about a 20 sow operation, and that consumed, and he was a cereal producer, and that consumed all of his low grade grain. So, and that's how a lot of pigs went into the. That's basically how most of the pig supply was back in the day. So, yeah, it's going to be. But as I said, the colour in this is, our desire to get a better part of the not just do farm gate price, but to get a better price, the price that comes from going direct, and that's where there's some complication and time taken.
Yeah, because I guess the other part of my question was the pros and cons, like the pros and cons of having a multi-enterprise as opposed to a single enterprise.
Yeah,
and I guess we've done both. Like we've had multiple enterprises and just been insanely busy.
It's exhausting.
And then we've gone back to a single enterprise being the vegetables, and now hit a point where we've run into drought and it's collapsed that way. So, because we didn't have the diversity. So, I'm just...
Well, you didn't have the diversity, but I suppose from listening to Ray, at least, it seems like the water, you didn't have enough water either.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right.
So if you had the water, then you may well have not found as much stress from the drought as you would have otherwise.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, no, I think that it seems to me it's a labor supply thing, no matter whether it's your labor or somebody else's. And then of course the more enterprises, like you say, then the more people that you may well need, more labor units you'll need, and then you've got the social complications that come with that, which is where a lot of this falls down, of course. So the property that I consulted on this week, it's fairly like new owners. It's a different sort of thing in terms that it's got a high net worth who's backing the development of a site, but its biggest challenge is managing, because it's got the labour supply, but coordinating that labour supply, and they're all getting paid a wage, which bears no and they're never going to own the place. So where's the incentive? And so the kind of operation you get out of that, or the kind of work ethic that you get out of that, is going to be different to one where it's an owner operator or someone who's got incentive or equity. So the other place I went to yesterday, he'd started off trying to do everything. He had a market garden, cows, chickens, blah, blah, blah. And he just, and accommodation. And he went back to, he's just doing accommodation and cattle and a bit of veg. But veg is not, as you know, your vegetable producers, you know, it takes a huge amount of effort.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. So to do that, so he just came back, and it was really good to chat to him because, as I said at the start, it was like a tune-up. And I said to him, you know, it's okay. You can still call yourself a farmer, which is important to him, if your majority of your income is coming from your accommodation. That's okay. Don't, you know, because you're still, you know, you're still running a farm and you're still doing all of that. I mean, that's the majority of the landscape. So that's okay. Yeah. People put themselves under you know, I know it's sort of a bit different to what you're asking, but people put themselves under all sorts of pressure.
It's relative. It's very, very relative, that question, that people put themselves under a lot of pressure to be a farmer and be a productive farmer.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this guy, 80% of his income's coming from some cabins he's got on the property, and that's great.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, so that, it's like Tom Bradman said to me years ago. He runs an enterprise called Nomad Farms, which I'll just pull up in South Australia, and Tom loves his cows, right? Anyway, he got it here. Yeah, so on the property is called Woodlands Run. Now, Tom loves his cows, but the problem is his landscape's only so big, and so he just doesn't have enough landscape to be a cattle producer by itself. So he runs chickens, and as he said to me, and this is Tom being a pragmatist, he's saying, my chicken enterprise, my broiler enterprise, feeds my cattle addiction. Right, so he's just rational about it. So that's a mixed species enterprise where he's basically got his labour units down to a point where that works. But he's also bringing in, like last time I talked to him, he was having, because he's got enough grass. I mean, broilers don't take up a lot of space. And so what he does is, or what he was doing at the top when I was there, he had a young person who was landless, and this is an expensive area on the Flurio. And so that young person was okay with that. They had a house in town, and they were doing like a lot of people have done forever. They lived in town, but they go out to their farm, and the farm hasn't got a house on it, or they go out to a leasehold, and that's what. And they're running their own layer flock on his property, which fits in really well with his beef operation. So yeah, they're the kind of things. But I think that, you know, slowly build up each enterprise. You know, follow that polyface rule of you know, not taking on anything else until you've mastered the first. You know, which is hard for an innovator.
Yes, yes, it is.
Silence.
Deathly. Oh dear. I told you about Jeff and Michelle over at Southampton. Years ago, because Jeff is one of the worst innovators I've ever seen. He's a cracker, and he won't mind me saying this. Anyway, because I've talked about him lots of times, and he talks about himself in the same terms. But anyway, Southampton Homestead and Farm. So yeah, these characters. So Jeff, there's his thing. He's farmer 500 years. So Jeff's on the workplace. Anyway, Jeff.
We know Jeff and Michelle.
Yeah. So Jeff, I get there one day and there's all these new animals, and I said there was new pigs, and they were in the wrong spot, and there were bloody rabbits, and I'm going, and Michelle is looking at me as if to say, "Can you speak to my husband?" So,
do you charge for that service? I might have to.
well, I'm doing it for free right now, and you can just change places here if you like, Samantha. It's you can do a little role play. Anyway, what I said. So Jeff asked the fatal question. He said, because we were doing this planning for the next year, and I said, I think it was at the end of 2015 or something. And Jeff asked the fatal question. He said, "So Daz, if this was your farm, what would you do next year?" I said, I said, "All right, mate, what I would do is I'd get rid of those effing this, that, and the other for a start, and I would make farming boring." So make 2016 the year that farming became boring, because and I said to him, for an innovator, it's like the monotony of the mundane tasks of agriculture is like an anathema to them. And I think that I haven't thought about this deeply, but I think that a lot of farmers, if you do the personality assessment of them, a lot of them are innovators, because you have to be in a lot of ways to be able to deal with all of the questions that are asked of you when you're trying to manage something as complex as a agroecology. So it pays to be innovative, but and I think that that's why there's possibly some mental health issues out there in agriculture, is because some of these folks who are then struck down by the mundane task, particularly in industrial agriculture, if that's what they're involved with, they're without they're not being nurtured enough, if you like. So anyway, that's just a little side theory, but anyway,
I agree with that.
Yeah, because old days farms were a lot more diverse. They were smaller. You could, in terms of trade were a bit better. All of that, and farms being closer together, you had friends around you. So whereas now, it's increasingly isolated pursuit and isolating pursuit. Anyway, so I said to Jeff that, and I said, well, how do you nurture yourself and nurture your innovation? I said, well, turn that innovation towards the things that you need to have done right now, and that because our other conversation at the time was around data, and that we needed to have better record keeping so that we knew where we were going. And so I said, turn your innovation towards that, towards time and motion studies, towards just building a data, so that and its analytics, so that we can elevate the conversation on what you're doing, and understand better what you're doing. Because, as I think I said to a group the other day, or I think when I did the soils thing the other day, I think data is going to be how we improve. And it's a way that an innovator can be nurtured. I mean, a lot of innovators are really happy to build spreadsheets, maybe not sit and analyze them for too long, but at least do the build. And they've got the capacity to capture a lot of things. Whereas the sort of more accountant mind perhaps doesn't have the ability to see all, but is really good at being able to manage the data, if that makes sense. And that's in their relationship, in Jeff and Michelle, that worked well, because Jeff's really good at pulling together the big picture, and Michelle's a bit more methodical and able to able to manage the data as it comes through. And then together, when the data comes out, then the innovator and it's sort of like the innovator and the accountant come together, and that's a really good marriage. Which goes to your question as well, in terms of the roles that we play within our marriages and within our relationships, is identifying who's good at what, and sort of assigning tasks as a function of that. And that's something that at Polyface they've done really, really well. and other operations that I've seen. So that's I know it's a bit of a digression from where we are, but that's a big part of what we see as being necessary.
Yeah, it's definitely relevant.
I went to a really good talk years ago that Jo Bear. Jo is she's the daughter of a very famous farmer in this region, a great innovator, successful farmer called Bill Twigg. And anyway, Jo married into the Bear family of Bears Lagoon, which is up near Bort, Kerrang, up that way. It's a very well-known region. Anyway, now when Jo married into that family, there were two brothers, and her brother-in-law married a woman as well. And so what they were in was a partnership of two couples, two brothers and two in-laws, if you like, and into a partnership on about 10,000 acres or so. And she was describing how they managed that. And that was a mixed farm, so they're doing cereal crops. I think they had a bit of horticulture, but, row crop horticulture on large scale, maybe some tomatoes or something like that. And they had sheep. And so not a lot of enterprises, but still, and of a scale. And she was saying that one of the most powerful things that made, because she said it was terrible to start with, you got the dynamics between brothers, and then you've got these wives who are trying to find their place in the whole thing, and that it was a real challenge. And she said that the best thing they did was they got they were able, I think, through rural counselling, they were able to get an organisational psychologist come in, and they worked with them to basically identify their personality types, and then from that, the assignation of roles according to those personalities. And then they also had the sort of classic working on the business meetings that were scheduled at particular intervals, and working in the business meetings, which were run according to a schedule. So they basically created an operational constitution, you might say. And she said, life is still dynamic, but it's a damn sight better than what it was, because they just had a lot more certainty, and they had and the biggest thing, of course, is clarity. So that was a big thing for them. But it's a matter of us putting out these examples and people, deciding for themselves what they're going to do. And it's interesting, we've got Jemmy and Ollie on the call today as well. And, I haven't quite got the picture with them, but, we've got a number of people as adults coming together into a farmed community. They're going to really have to get that all sorted. You two are the classic mum and dad farmers with some kids. It's a different dynamic, because you two are the primary decision makers, whereas when you've got 4, 5, 6 decision makers, that just makes it even more complicated.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Darren.
thank you, Darren.
Yeah, but have we got anything? I mean, you're obviously going through all of this. Perhaps you could elaborate a bit more.
Well, we're just having
we're just having the midlife crisis. We've done the trajectory of doing everything and burnt out, and went away to find ourselves and came back and then fell into a drought. So
yeah,
just kind of not sure where we're going.
Yeah. Well,
vegetables is where we know where we can make money, but we don't want to be doing it when we're 50.
No.
We've got all this rubbish timber that which is what wants to grow here, but I don't know how to monetize it.
Yeah, and it's rubbish.
And we've got all this. We've got country that's really, really good for pigs and cattle, but how do we do those in a way that's economically nourishing?
Well, I think one of the good. I would probably, of all of the enterprises that you've just listed, obviously vegetables vegetables are someone with a young back. It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter how you paint it.
Yeah.
Or people that are 4 foot tall. It's well, there's a,
tall because they're bent over at the back because they've been growing vegetables.
yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, so it's a younger person's sport, and you recognise that having done it. But I think of all of the enterprises that you've mentioned, pigs are probably, and you've already talked about this a few times. I think that pigs and cattle are good. Cattle not because they make money. Cattle are
Landscaping.
Yeah, they're basically a landscape maintainer, and that's on a property of your size, because you've literally got to run quite a few cattle before you get the money, and then you've got to be able to finish them and do all of that sort of thing, and that takes a particular kind of landscape. So, and size of landscape. So there's that. But pigs, on the other hand, you're relatively proximate to fairly significant cereal growing region.
Yeah.
So there's that. So you're
very proximate to apples and
all of that. So there's a whole waste stream there's a feed stream that's close by, and I think you've got a landscape that's quite amenable to it. It's just a matter of you, I would say, just starting off, with a relatively small setup and going from there. And you've been to Tammy and Stewart's and had a look at their system as far as the. It's great what they've done with the CSA. I think that's awesome, because to be able to get the subscriber system or for people to subscribe to what you're doing is obviously would obviously take out a lot of the feast and famine that you've no doubt been enduring from most of your farming work time. So to take that away would be amazing. And I know you've had that also with your CSA, with your veggies, but I suppose that this version of it would have a lot less peaks and troughs in terms of production supply, because with vegetables it's up and down like a bloody yo-yo, as you well know. Whereas it's you can have a much more reliable stream of production when you do livestock than you can with plants. Simple as that.
The sort of the thought bubble that's been bubbling around for me at the moment, as far as the animals go, is, we went on our overseas trip. We spent a month with a family who did the on-farm boning room thing.
Yep.
In the Ariège, and we don't really enjoy spending time doing our own butchering. A little bit of it's fine. I enjoy a little bit of it, but I couldn't do what Tammy does.
That's okay. I was talking more not in terms of Tammy and Stuart's production system, including the butchery. If I could say again, I think that's perhaps a reflection. Tammy and Stuart. Particularly Tammy's she's a tour de force. She has got incredible energy, and not everyone's got that, and that's okay. It's like Jason and Belinda. Like, people were saying, "Oh, why don't you do things like Tammy?" And they said, "Well, Tammy's got a much smaller property, a much smaller number of animals. They've got 150 sows, right? So that's a huge number of mothers to manage, and boars, and they're turning off 40 pigs a week. So the sort of concept that you have to, and they've got 2 young kids. Their kids aren't teenagers, right? So you've got everyone, and they want to have a different kind of life to what Tammy and Stuart do. So everyone, and that's where it gets down to your context again. You've got to really be clear about what you want and how you want to run it. So you don't have to feel like you have to do everything. So if you don't want to do butchering, don't do butchering. Just find a way to make it so it works for you.
So the thought bubble I'm having at the moment is to do sort of, because we have done direct marketed broilers, pigs, and cattle in the past.
Yep.
And by the time you get small numbers of animals to an abattoir, to a butcher, and then to your customers, there is no margin in it. So the thought bubble that I have is to just minimally process the animals and find families who are willing to learn a bit of basic butchering, and so sell whole carcasses, just particularly pigs and small pigs, just broken into 4 pieces.
I gotcha.
Well,
if you can, if you can do that with pigs, because one of the chickens are perhaps easier from that perspective, and the reason for that,
I want to do chickens.
Well, I'm just saying the problem is that pork is the 4th meat, right? Meaning that people, like as Jason and Belinda have said to me so many times, if a pig was made up of pork belly and bacon, then life would be so much easier, but it's not. Right. And so you've got to find, so for them, they stockpile a whole lot of hams, and you've got to find all of these other creative uses, but that's part of the deal. And so, so the alternative to that, and so for you to find families which are going to basically take quarters and, prime cuts, as it were, then they've got to be people who really like eating pork, and most people don't eat pork like that. It's just not the way people eat. It's hard enough to find people who will take prime cuts of lamb or sheep, let alone, lamb or beef, let alone pork. Whereas chicken, people take a whole chicken, right? So that's not such a big struggle. I think that one of the ways that you might want to think out of the box on this is kind of like I said to the guy yesterday, is to think about sausage and to think about salami and to think about that sort of process as being an alternative to, and maybe work through that in your thought bubble as far as trying to get rid of the whole animal, because people do have salami a lot more than they do have pork chops, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How often does a family have pork?
Not as often as they used to, I reckon.
Pardon?
Not as often as they probably did a generation ago.
Oh, yeah, well, that's right.
That's probably a reflection on the quality of pork that's getting around.
Well, yeah, perhaps. We had, when I grew up, we had pigs, so we ate pork. But even then, we didn't eat as much pork as we did sheep or cattle, because they just took a lot more. They just took so much more energy to produce, so I would consider the possibilities on having a product which, because I look, go down that rabbit hole and go down that pathway, I should say, and do the investigation on that, because that's certainly worth doing. But you may also find that it might be easier for you to create, it might be more effective for you to grind the whole animal and sell a brand of sausage, or sell a brand of salami, or and go through that. I don't know. They're things that you're going to need to
work your way through.
I know, and that's something you might want to pop up on the thing, pop up on the workplace, and tag people like Jason and get his thoughts on that as far as how they're handling it. Because they're literally doing 35 to 40 a week, so that's a lot that but they're having to work hard to do that too. And how far are you from Brisbane? Hour and a half?
2.5, 3.
2.5, right. Okay, so you're just that bit further, yeah. So, which is, so your major markets would be Warwick, Toowoomba?
No, our major market's still going to be Brisbane.
Still going to be, mate. But what about Warwick and Toowoomba?
Fairly conservative. And when we did the psychographics, we started that, and it's like our district here, Stanthorpe, the median income in Stanthorpe is 30 grand a year.
Right.
You go to Warwick and it jumps to about 35.
Yeah.
You go to, I can't remember what I did. Toowoomba might have been about 40, but then you go to Ipswich is 42, and then Brisbane jumps to 47.
Yeah.
As a median income. So
yeah. But the cost of living is an influence there as well, because it'll be cheaper to live in the country towns than Brisbane.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
There's still people.
Yeah, I understand. Well, when you say that's a demographic analysis, the psychographic is more about the vibe of the people that live in there. Are there the kind of people there that'll buy? And of course, it's always going to be in Brisbane that they would.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a really good question to open up in the economy section, and for the broader network that we've got here to work through it and do what they can to help you, as opposed to just looking at it in a little bubble of our Q&A, and even further to that, in the bubble of yourselves. I think that this is a question a lot of people are going to be looking at. And the good thing about you is that you've been at it for a while and you've tried a few things. So it's so you've been about and you've done a bit of the market testing on a number of levels. So that'll make the conversation pretty good, I reckon.
Thanks, Darren. We'll let you move on.
No worries, man. Well,
No, I'm done. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you. All right. Very good. Thanks. All right. We've got Pablo here first, and then I've got Colin. So Pablo sent a question. Says, hi, Darren here. Pablo has just sent through the private chat a couple of pics of the soil cover we have in most of our 2.5 hectare field. So I'll just grab that up. Workplace chat. No, don't do that. Go to this one. Chat. Thank you, Joshua, for listening in today. I just saw that comment. That's good. I can't see anything from you there, Pablo, in the private chat. Maybe there's somewhere else, but I can't see anything there. No pics. So you might want to try that again, mate. Otherwise, right. So we would eventually like to have. Oh, here we go. Here's those photos. Thanks, Pablo. So here's the cover that we've got. Okay, and this is a winter cover, so got a bit of greenish through there. So we would eventually like to have an agroforestry layout with top and soft fruit, hopefully also animals in the corridors. This field has originally been partly on cereals and partially on pastures 50 years back, then abandoned, reverted to young woods with mostly bramble, broom and young oaks. We've had a council tractor coming last summer and opened up the quite thick areas of bramble and broom. The whole is now a Da'asa style system, and the pics show how the soil looks like now. What would you suggest to do now we can get the grass growing again? We thought to spray native microorganisms, but waiting for warmer weather. Yeah, good question, Pablo. I think that I'll just see the other photo that you've got there. Just get rid of that. Answer live done. Yeah, the two photos there. Look, you've got a few little spots of grass there. What I would like you to do would be the best way to get grass growing is to grow livestock, and so is to have livestock. So if you don't have them yourself, get somebody else's. There's probably shepherds in the area that can help you, and if you don't have yours, and just get them on and get them off. So let's say that there's a shepherd who's got, let's say, 100 sheep or 200 sheep, if you put them in, fence off the areas that you don't want them to go to, and just get them on, get them to graze what's there, and then get them off. And that's the best thing that you can do, because grazing animals need grass, and grass needs grazing animals. And if you get that thing happening right now, then that will help. You can go, of course, you can go and spend money on putting out microorganisms and doing all of that sort of thing. But until such time as you get the grass herbivore relationship going, you know, you'll be spending money that you don't otherwise need to. So I would look at doing something like that. The other way, of course, is to do it with your own animals. And if you had your own animals on there, then that would have you move along. Yeah. So you're moving. You're planning to get 5 sheep. Let's work that through a bit. You've got, was it 2.5 acres? Sorry, 2.5 hectares. So if you've got 2.5 hectares, I'd probably wait until, because there's another couple of ways that you could play this, Pablo. Being in the area that you are, you can probably get some hay. And if you get some of the hay, then you'll be able to supplementary feed with them. And so, because let's say that what comes up, looking at those photos that you had there, the photos that you had there, you've got grasses in there, but you've also got a few broadleaves. I don't know what they are, but you've got quite a bit of grass that's coming up there, which is great. So I would let that grass get up to maybe 20 centimeters in height, and then bring the sheep, and then bring your, if you can get sheep, get your sheep, but supplementary feed them with some hay, so that you can, so that you keep their diet along okay. That will also, the hay will start to introduce other grasses from other farms, right? Which will, and if you do that, then that will, so you feed out in the field where you've got it, and you'll be fine. So, but if I look at 2.5 hectares, look, I'm gonna be very basic about this and look at it from a that I've got. Let's say that I'm going to produce 2,500 kilos of forage times 2.5 hectares. So that's 6,250 kilos of forage I'm going to produce approximately. Now you'll divide that. Now, depending on the age of the sheep and cattle eat between cattle are about 3% of their body weight a day, and sheep are about 2.5%, because they're a bit more efficient feed converters. So if you've got, say, a 50 kilo sheep, so we've got 6,250. So if I've got a 50 kilo sheep as opposed to a lamb, you'll need to find out what your live weight is. Then we'll times that by 0.025, I'll say, so that's 1.25 kilos. If the feed is pretty average, let's say we're going to have we'll just average at 3 kilos per day, right? So 6,250, depending on the metabolizable energy that's in that food, divided by, 3. So that means you've got 2,083 animal days or sheep days per year off that. Now you divide that by 5, right? And that tells us we can have 416 days of grazing available from that area, right? So therefore, this is what I'm trying to get to. You could probably, especially if you sold those sheep or you put them in the freezer at the end, or whatever you do, or just you bought some sheep. So you just had the sheep over the spring summer period and autumn, and then you sold them, because obviously in the winter you've got dormancy, it gets too cold, and then you can take them away, right, or put them or kill them and eat them. So if you do that, you'd probably be better off getting around 10, and 10 sheep shouldn't cost you too much. But yeah, that's that. So if I've got, what do I say? If I've got 10 sheep times 3 kilos per day, that's 30 kilos per day. So if I've got 6250 divided by 30, it's 200 days with 10 sheep. Okay, so yeah, start to think in those sorts of terms, because basically you're doing a rationing system, and that'll help you with deciding how many you have. But I think, yeah, let the grass grow up a bit to 20 or 30 centimeters, please. Yeah, so we get the sheep once we have 20, and then kill them before winter. Yeah, that's pretty well it, mate. Or sell them if you like as well. But yeah, that's what you could do. There's some good people on here. One person who I think you'd probably have a good conversation with would be Adam McLean. You'll see that Adam McLean, Adam's in the workplace. I'll just go back to the workplace here. If you search for Adam, Adam's probably the best sheep person that we've got in terms of humid landscape sheep management. McLean, pardon me, not Mick. And he's, yeah, all of his posts are always about sheep, so pretty well. So have a look at him and maybe tag him in some questions. His enterprise is called Utopia, which is a lovely play on words. So yeah, have a look at what Adam's doing. He's in northeast Canada, so pretty cold part of the world, and he feeds his sheep go over winter. So he's got his sheep out in the snow and so on. So yeah, really good person to talk to. Probably the person here. Oh, the other person I think to if you're interested in sheep, who I forgot as well, is Andy Darlington. Andy's in the south of France, and Andy's a commercial sheep producer in the south of France, and this is his kind of landscape. So he is dealing with a lot of what you're dealing with, and doing it in an agroforestry landscape. So they would be the two key people. Andy being the closest to your conditions, although he's probably gets a little bit drier because he's on the Mediterranean side, not the Atlantic side. So he gets definitely drier than you do in Galicia. So, but yeah, talk to those people. We have a mare as well, an 800. Yeah, well, she's going to have to be rotated with them. So I would fence her in with the sheep, and I would follow the. I would rotate them around. Yeah, horses on small properties, you're going to have to you're probably going to have to supplementary. Yeah, so put them in the same paddock at the same time, and you're going to have to supplementary feed them. But yeah, a supplementary feed the mare, because she's going to eat you. She's going to eat that area out pretty well if she's that big. So yeah. And she's working, so do a planned grazing, yes. But I think you're going to, if she's a working mare, is that because you're going to use her for animal power, or is it because you're going to? Yeah, right. So she's going to need to eat a fair bit. I would think that you're probably going to have to go forage crops for her. Otherwise, you're going to have to buy feed, because you just won't have enough feed on the farm to, or you're not going to be able to produce enough on your farm to be able to do that. Have you got anybody that you know who runs working animals at all, like for animal power? Because there's a couple of people that I know. The main person I know is on Facebook, who I'll just put him up, is Ricky Lee Thomas. Now, Ricky's a good mate, and I'm still connected in with Isabella's Facebook, so just bear with me. I lent this computer to my daughter on the weekend. There's a young fella there from a long time ago. Right, reload. Oops, Facebook. So me. So with this, Ricky Lee Thomas, he runs the Ricky Glenn Thomas, pardon me. He runs the Animal Power program at Sterling College in Vermont, and I know that he's been doing a lot of work with his oxen and horses in doing a lot of forestry work quite recently, which is what they do mainly. So, yeah, have a look at what Ricky's doing. Ricky's coming into the workplace because he's done a Rex, but he's not in there yet because he's busy doing the winter forestry work that he does at Sterling College. But he's probably the best person I know. The other people that I know and have worked with is what's their name? Ken Lang. Is he in here? Have I got him? Ken Lang. There he is. Orchard Hill Farm. That's the guy. Orchard Hill Farm. They're in Canada, and they run a completely or almost completely animal powered farm. Beautiful farm, really successful, and they team that up with a CSA, and they run Suffolk horses. But have a look at their website as well. It's got some good information. But I think if you're going to do if you're going to do horses, then you really need to pay attention to how much feed you're going to provide them. So how efficient is a working horse in terms of food conversion? I don't know that off the top of my head because it really depends on how much the horse works. It's like if you do exercise, you're going to have a lot more. You're going to have a lot more energy need than what you would than if you were than if you weren't. So it's the same with horses. So if it's 800 kilos, then you're going to, if that horse is actually working, how many hours a day is it working? All of that. So it's a bit of I don't have an answer for you there, Pablo. That's something that I think is a really good question and one that you might pose in the soil section of the workplace, and we'll see what sort of conversation we can get going for you there. I certainly know like a horse is approximately, an 800 kilo horse is going to be approximately 2 to 2.5 standard animal units, animal units, because a cow is a standard animal unit is a 450 dry cow, 450 kilo dry female cow, right? Or cow. So, so a lot of things are measured off her. So a horse, depending on whether it's working or not working, and its weight is going to help you there. So now, if a cow is a ruminant, whereas a horse is not. So a cow needs a different kind of food to can eat a different kind of food to a horse as well. So there's all of those things in this, and I think that we'd probably be best to address that in the workplace in a thread. So if you want to, and I think your question might be, I'm considering, I've got a 800 kilo working horse. I'm looking to have that work in our gardens or do whatever you want it to do. How much feed am I going to need for that animal? And therefore then, how much area will you need? And what kind of feed are we going to need? I think they're going to be the questions that you ask. All right, hope that helps. All right. But yeah, I would just do grazing. Don't worry about doing all of the, what I call la stuff, all of the microbial blah, blah, all of that. I wouldn't worry about any of that at this stage. I think just get grazing and then we'll worry about all that other stuff later on. All right. What else have we got? We have Ollie. Sorry, Colin. I'll get to Colin first. Pardon me.
Hello.
G'day, Colin. How are you, mate? Sorry to keep you waiting there. I'm getting
no problem.
a full deck of calls today.
Two questions. One is I was speaking with Kiwi Tech's UK branch today about
good. Yep.
about mobile fencing, and also the kind of watering setup that they have, for water troughs. And one of the concerns was we obviously get frost here. It's not severe, but you can go a week, being in below zero temperatures.
Yep.
And they were saying that the mountain systems that they have to plug into need to be based on the surface, because you have to kind of like basically wiggle and twist it to connect it up. So he was saying you can't really mount them subsurface so they won't freeze.
Yeah, no.
So it was like, what are the?
Yeah, I don't. I
would kind of systems
in your case.
Yeah. But it's kind of what are the kind of suitable options in terms of,
well,
I've seen you get the taps where you basically you bury the pipe down and you turn it off 2 foot down.
There's that sort of setup, but I say that, and then but at the same time, well, with your side, look, you could run the Kiwi Tech taps that we're talking about. I'll just put them up on the screen so people know what we're talking about here. Just bear with me.
I mean, to give you an idea, I was looking at either running, kind of taking like a mole plough and burying a pipe around the outside of the field, or running one straight down the middle, because then you've got kind of 80 meters either side to the edges. So really, the way the kind of strip raising will work, you only ever need to go about 50 meters either way, maximum.
Yeah.
If I just run one down the middle rather than going all the way around the outside, and just take a point every, 50 or 100 meters.
Yeah. Well, that's one way. I'd like to see a drawing of that to see how it fits.
Yeah, I'm just working.
Yeah. That's cool. So this is a Kiwi Tech fitting here. On the screen, I've got a Kiwi Tech fitting.
Yep.
Right. So there is no reason why that couldn't be buried to a depth along with the pipe. The main supply pipe couldn't be buried to a depth. Similar, I'll just see if I can find that photo. Let me see. I had a photo of a, not in there, just bear with me for a minute. I thought I had it in the livestock pipes. I don't know if I have. Maybe with troughs. No. So, I haven't got it. I know I have a photo somewhere. I just can't think of where I've got it. But anyway, there's no reason why at this point right here, well, the pipe couldn't be at a depth, at the standard depth of your area, because there will be, I don't know, what's the standard depth that pipes are put? 18 inches?
I think, yeah, they usually have to be below, I think kind of 600 mil rings a bell with me.
Yeah, right. So what people do there is, like in the US and Europe, what I've seen people do and what we've done ourselves is two ways. One is that you have, and the best way I think, is to put a tube around the pipe down to that depth. So you'll have basically a tube, and like at Polypost, what they do there is they use rubber culvert pipe or plastic culvert pipe, because it's cheap and you can cut it into whatever length you want, and they put that down as a and so that you can reach down and plug into the portable system. So they've got a system that's akin to this, except they don't use the Kiwi Tech. They use a valve. Right, but it's the same principle, except instead of that being on the surface, it's down at 6. Well, in their case, I think it's at about 18 inches, 15 to 18 inches, because they don't freeze as hard as say you would there. So 600 mil, that's 2 feet, but more or less.
Yeah, well, that's what we do now with the shut-off valves. Just use like, you know, your plastic, what we would use is like a drainage pipe, and then we just, you know, stick that in its end, cut it 3 feet or 2 feet, whatever, and just leave it and then pat the soil around it, and then you can just reach in and turn the valve on and off.
Yeah. Well, there's these frost-free hydrants as well, which you may well have seen. They're pretty common in the US. I don't think I've seen them so much in Europe, but that's a frost-free hydrant. So that goes down. So, well, here's the install here. So you can see you've got it above ground, and then it goes down, and then it's below the frost line, and it's connected into a pipe. So, but that's an expensive solution, because then that's a permanent solution.
By
comparison. So
yeah, and it sticks up out the ground, so it's like it's an obstruction in some way as well. Vulnerable. Yeah,
exactly. Whereas basically having a valve which is at depth, and that you put the pipe around it so you can access it, I think that's a better way to go. In which case, I don't see any reason why you couldn't run Kiwi Tech in that way.
Yeah, just put it under and have that pipe there, so you can just effectively reach in with your hand and connect it up.
Yeah, exactly. The hard part, of course, is going to be that wherever you put it, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to have to dig down to that depth where you've got where you're going to connect that valve on, because that's just the way it is, which I'm sure you're already familiar with that problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, and then you can fit that on. But the big thing with the Kiwi Tech pipe system, though, it only runs, I think, 40 mil, I think, is the biggest one that you can run. But for a property your size, that's probably going to be all right.
Yeah, we at the moment we run. We kind of run a mixture of diameters, because we kind of used what we had at the time. But it's normally like 20 or 25 mil. Certainly, like the mains pipe that comes off the road is an old copper pipe, and it's I think it's 25. It's either 20 or 25. I think it's an inch. You know, it's 25 mil.
That sounds about right.
You don't need anything bigger than that, because, you know, even if you're using the mains pressure, you know, it comes through that pipe to start with. So anything bigger is not going to change.
No. So that pipe, that fitting, where is it? Oh, that's right. So the body, you can adjust up. That's right. So you can put a fitting on here, which will adjust it up to a 40 mil. But the whole thing, that's a 25 mil pipe otherwise that's going in and out. But that fits with what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment we just run, it's just all, I saw you had it up earlier, all the Filmac fittings. You know, we just run Alkaline pipe with Filmac fittings, and we just put it into it's a really small trough, just with a valve in it, you know, a ball cock. And, you know, when I'm moving them, I literally just let the pipe drag along the grass. But when it comes to the winter time just now, it becomes a problem, because then, like where they are now, they've got access to the river, so they can just walk into the river and drink, so it's okay. But then when it freezes up, if they don't have, you know, for some bits they won't have access to the river, and then it becomes more of an issue, because you've then got to manually make sure they've got it every day, you know. And it's whether I do, you know, something under the ground, or whether I'll literally just get a water butt and just fill it up, because we've only got 2 Highland cows and like 11 sheep and 3 alpacas. You know, it's nothing really major. You know, the water requirements in the sheep and alpaca, if it's raining, which it is most of the time here, is almost nothing, because they get all the water from the grass anyway.
So were you looking at something like this system though?
Yeah, I was just inquiring, because I was actually inquiring about the electric fencing. I just inquired about it anyway. You know, it's not. Yeah. I didn't actively have that in mind before, but I figured I would ask about it anyway. To see.
Well,
I mean,
you've only got that many.
That's kind of not far off what I do now. You know.
Yeah. Well, that's what you're doing.
I think. I think the trough we've got is like 30, 40 litres. You know, it's not even big.
40 litres.
It doesn't really need to be, because it's not. It's small. It's a kind of standard plastic drinking trough for a small paddock here.
Yeah, right.
You know,
okay. Well, that does the job.
It's so cool. Yeah. The other thing was we're getting an excavator in a week or two to remove a load of storage that's along the fence line in the orchard.
Sorry,
on the roadside.
To move a load of what? Sorry.
Just like old stone.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same kind of stone that our house is built out, but I don't know why it's there, but there's a big row of it about 50 metres long, and we want to put a windbreak up to help reduce the wind load in the orchard.
Yep.
So I was wondering, if it was a wise, whilst we're doing that, just to dig a trench and, look at the kind of the soil layers whilst we've got that in, because we've not done much soil analysis here at all. And the ground seems pretty compacted. Just to kind of get an idea, but it was what you would, I've not done anything like that before, and it's if you have any, recommendations when you're doing that, or if is winter even a good time to do it? I don't know,
So
dig it and it would be...
just to get it clear, you want to take the stone and what do you want?
Oh no, we're just sorry, we're just out the way. But I was saying, whilst we have the excavator on site doing that job, whilst as well just going into the field and
doing a bit of geotech
analysis. Yeah. Geo work at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's not something I've done before.
It depends on what you've got planned. I mean, it's going to cost you money. So if you've got something planned, are you doing it just because you're curious, or?
Well, more than anything, so far the plan just now in terms of enterprises, it's really just going to start with layers at the moment.
Yeah,
we do other stuff, but most of it's just for ourselves.
I wouldn't worry about it, Colin. If you're just going to do layers, I wouldn't worry about it, because I think
we run the cattle in the sheep just to graze the grass, just to get the kind of herbivore relationship going, and keep rotating them with the grass, and the chickens can just run behind them, but we don't have enough land,
who does?
Cattle and stuff, yeah.
Even the Queen's still buying land.
Christ, no.
I don't see. I would only go and do that kind of analysis if, say, for example, you wanted to put in an orchard, like a commercial orchard, and you were really curious about what the strata looked like, and that's where I'd probably do it. Or if you were doing any building work, such as building a dam or something like that, which was using that. But otherwise, I don't see any strong purpose for that if you're just doing a grazing operation.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the only kind of waterworks we're doing is, at some point looking at possibly putting in like a large pond. I was doing some of the water calculation for the evapotranspiration, and we're negative.
That's what I was going to say.
So I don't see there's any need for us. We're so different from Australia in terms of the climate. I don't think there's any need for us to go putting in dams, because
no.
The water would just fill and not go anywhere.
No, well, that's right. I mean, it's just going to be something to look at.
Other than putting a pond.
Yeah, it'll be something to look at.
Exactly. Well,
if you're going to build a pond, then if you've got a site for it, then by all means go and look at the soil, because if you can use the soil that's there, then that will be cheaper than lining it.
Yeah.
So that's where I would go and use it.
Yeah. Okay.
And take some photos. Take some photos of the profile, but also text visually what we do is, and I'll just get up a photo here. Where are we? Here. Visually, what I would do for geotech is, go on computer. I'll go to this point, have I? Just bear with me for 2 shakes. Geotech. I haven't got every folder of mine organised properly yet. But, what you both, I'll just, here we go, Geotech. All right. So you can see here, now that's done with an excavator, right? Can you see that?
Yep.
Right. So you'll dig down. Now you can see here that as I go down, the soil texture changes. So right here, you can see the clay is quite thick and heavy, right? Now, so what we do generally is we take samples of each and we determine the texture. So we determine the proportion of clay, silt, and sand of each. But then we also do tests such as the Emerson.
Like your simple water test, we just literally put it in a jar and shake it. And
Yeah, you can do it that way, or you can also go back to your childhood and make a kind of a mud pie. You take a bit of the dry soil, add a bit of water to it, not too much so it goes liquid, but just enough so you can make a ball. And you knead that ball like you would like if you were making a bun, making a bread bun, right? That's about how much you'll put in your hand, and you just roll it and roll it and roll it, and you knead it, and then you push it out in your hand between your two hands like this, and you form what's called a ribbon. And ribbons break at lengths according to the proportion of clay, silt, and sand. And again, if you want to have a thread about this, write a thread about in the soils group page, and we can speak to that. But yeah, you do that, and then the other thing that you want to do is take a piece of this soil at different heights and do what's called the Emerson test. I haven't got to this point in my book yet, obviously, but there's.
I've downloaded a paper. It was like just 3 pages, and it just called the test.
It's called the Emerson soil dispersivity test.
Yeah.
Right. And that test is where you get a bit of dirt and you put it in water. There's a whole process to it. There's the Emerson aggregate test. Here we are. So you...
Yes, I've got this. I downloaded this one.
Yeah, so you'll do that. That's probably the most... That and the texture analysis are the 2 most important tests to determine, as well as a percolation test. And a percolation test, well, I would probably, if I were you, probably position a dam where water is sitting for a long time, because there might be some reeds or rushes or something that it's obviously staged.
Yeah, I mean, the ground here, I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're on a low or a high or whatever. If you leave the ground, it just all goes to soft rushes. I mean, that's the big problem that farmers have when they're not grazing properly. The ground just
there you go. So it's probably going to be fairly easy for you to do all of this. But yeah, they're the usual tests that I will do. I mean, you can even dig a hole and compact the sides, and then fill it up with water and see how long it takes to empty. There's things like that you can do.
Yeah. See as well. See, in terms of putting in a pond, like our site kind of slopes from like one corner to the other, sort of mainly north, mainly kind of west, northwest, down towards the river.
Yep.
My thought initially was putting a pond kind of at the low side, just off the river. Just because that land seems prone to kind of flood away, the rushes tend to grow there really easily. Because all the kind of water filters down into that point. But would you, is there a standard thing you would do for that, or does it?
Oh well,
would you first thing ponds gathering anyway, or?
Well, yeah, you can do it that way. I mean, the first question is, what do you need to do the pond for? Are you doing it for aesthetic reasons to look at? What's the function of the pond?
Yeah, I suppose the function is aesthetics. Kind kind of trying to increase biodiversity, maybe looking at doing some kind of like small scale aquaculture, just out of curiosity, you know, and possibly a place we'd like to get some ducks and stuff.
Well, you're gonna. If that's the case, you probably put it in the most reliable position, and if it sounds like that might be, although sometimes often when you're down on rivers, because of the processes over time, you can find a lot of gravel and a lot of sand all mixed in, and so that reduces the ability of that pond to hold water.
Yes.
So therefore, you might want to bring it up again. These are things that I think are best addressed by you showing us diagrams of where you want to put things, but also photographs of where you want to put things, and then we can work through things with you. On that point, though, if you're going to pull that rock wall down, and you want to do some work with water, it may well be good for you to stockpile those rocks, because if you're doing any dam or any pond work or anything like that, the rocks would probably come in handy for any erosion control, but also for beautification.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
around. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean it's good rock anyway. I mean the plan would be to use it for something. So. No, it's fine. I'm working on water stuff now. I've been away the last kind of week, and I'm trying to catch up on some of these last videos as well. But I'm working on the water stuff just now. So once I get a kind of, a kind of current and future what we'd like to do, I'll post it up. And
yeah, that'd be good. Well, I was going to make an announcement on the homepage today that we're basically going to make ourselves available as we are currently in the Rex thing up until the time that we leave for our tour. So for those of you who are still yet to finish all of your task work and whatnot, I'll still be completely available. So yeah, keep at it. Even though we're all finishing the workshop, I'm going to continue. I think what I'll do is I'll have at least one. I think I might continue to have the two webinars a week, but they'll both be Q&As, so that we can continue to work through people's projects. But yeah. So
that's good, because some of this stuff is kind of. Like a lot of it, you're talking in Australian terms, and I sometimes, think.
I always find
it hard to think, well, what do I do here? Because it's, of course, no, absolutely. I don't mean that as a criticism. It's just here we're just such a funny climate. It's just bloody wet all the time and a bit miserable.
Well, that's right. So that's for us. So for us to make it easy for me, or to make it more effective for me, if you've got questions and you might think about this in the next couple of weeks, get a few photos together, just like Pablo just did then, a few photos and maybe a bit of a sketch plan or something like that, and then we can work through it a lot easier. All right. Because for me, I'm a very visual person. I love to see photos. Like if I see photos of landscape and soil surface and soil and a plan, I'm good to go.
No, I agree with that. There was something else I was going to say there. I forgot. Oh, it escaped me. Anyway, that's fine. I'll get that stuff posted. I'll get pictures taken. The soil thing, I suppose, it's more curiosity. I mean, the digger's not going to cost me anything, So like to do that whilst it's there is, it's not going to cost me any extra money, so. I figured just out one curiosity.
It won't hurt, but I'll just do it in those areas.
Solid.
Yeah,
absolutely. That makes sense. Cool. All right, I'll let you go on.
No worries, mate. Thank you very much for calling in, and have a good sleep. Now you can go to sleep.
Yeah, I will do. Cheers. I'll see what I'm done.
Take care, mate. Bye. All right. And we've got Ollie.
G'day, how are you going?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, very well. Just calling in from New Zealand.
Very good. How is it over there?
Oh, it's beautiful. They're all complaining about 27-degree heat, though. It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I remember being there years ago, and the front page of whatever the Auckland newspaper was, it said it was like this disastrous heat wave, and it was 32 or something. I was like,
Yeah,
oh.
they're doing the same thing at the moment. It's very funny,
Like
but it is a different heat, to be fair to them. Anyway,
it's like they say in Ireland, there's 2 times they stop work: when it snows and when the sun comes out.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so well, I just had one very quick question. I hope. I mean, 2 questions, but one's very quick. And it won't interest Colin at all. Kangaroos. How?
Colin's gone now. He heard kangaroos and he took off.
Yeah. So we have a mob of kangaroos hanging out at our house. There's no sheep there. I was just wondering how much of a problem, because I've heard you mention them before, that they don't have any predators and anything pushing them on. When you're trying to do a planned grazing operation, how much issue do they kind of?
I think a lot.
Yeah.
Look, you can, like when I did a grazing plan this week, or I worked on one with some clients this week, and one of the questions is, and I don't know which one it is, but anyway, one of the questions is accommodating wildlife in your grazing plan, but it's assuming, I think, when you're doing that, you're assuming. I'll go back. Most of those assumptions that have been built up in the questions of grazing plan development have not been developed for here in Australia. Now, I'm not saying that Australia is that much different to everywhere else, but it is in the sense that Australia doesn't have any cats, big cats.
Yeah.
And so if you go to Africa, or if you go to the United States has got coyotes. It's got pumas or mountain lions, and in some places it's got wolves. And then of course they go to Africa. Depending on where you are, they've got all of the stuff that they have in Africa. So whereas here in Australia, we've got the occasional wild dog. Dingoes there's no dingoes where we're down here in central Victoria, but there are wild dogs. But they're often domestic dogs which go out and pretend they're wolves at night, and then put the paper on the front porch in the morning after they've killed 20 sheep overnight, and then you've got and then that's it. So you don't have any predators really at all. No. So there's nothing moving any of these animals on or along, and kangaroos behave like that. I mean, how close can you get to kangaroos now?
Yeah.
So the other problem with kangaroos is that kangaroos are litter eaters. They're like horses and sheep, so they will eat the litter. And in a landscape like you've got on a dry slope in Muckleford, the last thing you need is something eating your litter.
Yeah.
Like, you go out there now and have a look at how much litter is on the ground. It's going to be pretty tough to hold on to. So I think where I'm leading to is that, unfortunately, exclusion is, especially if you're looking at creating some sort of enterprise, and you're on a bit of land which is already marginal, which it is, then you don't have much choice there, I don't think.
Yeah.
And that has a cost, but I saved you a lot of money a couple of weeks ago anyway, so you're flush.
You did, yeah. Very cool. Well, that was my sub question: is exclusion fencing a sort of a solution to that?
Well, you look at all of those properties that have got grass along the Muckleford Valley. They're down on the creek. They're the ones that are on the lower side of the Muckleford Road, aren't they?
Yeah.
All the ones on your side of the road have got nothing.
Yeah. It's just barren.
Yeah, because you got too many mouths to feed. The bits down the bottom, well, they've just got that much more fertility that even if they've got cattle and sheep grazing and kangaroos, they've got enough fertility to be able to manage that. And so unless you are able to well, even if you were able to lease some of that country that was down on the creek there, you're still going to have the problem of kangaroos up on your block. And I can guarantee you, any time you improve your landscape, you'll just get more kangaroos because they're not stupid.
Yeah.
You know, I've found that on so many properties that we've worked on. In fact, Lisa says, my wife says all the time, you know, properties that we've worked on always get more kangaroos. It's like, because they just get so much better forage.
Mm.
It's like, okay, well, that's no bloody help to anyone, is it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would consider I would start to do the feasibility study on that, and by all means, I mean, we had a bit of a chat about this last week, I think, but by all means, work through it in the workplace. So, all right, well, this is what we're looking to do. What's the best design? What's the best product? And you know, use the place to do that.
Yeah, cool.
The biggest question, I suppose, for you will be how much you exclude. Are you just looking at kangaroos and so on, or whether you go further than that?
Like rabbits, or what do you?
Well, with rabbits and also dogs and foxes, with what you're doing. So there's those questions I'd have as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But work through it in the workplace, and yeah, we'll see where we go with it.
Yeah, great, thanks. The other question, I realise we're pushed for time here, but
no, it's all right. Nearly it's just you and I almost now.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, it's sort of linked to that, but it's around specifically it's around the fact that we're not there yet, and we you know, it's sparked by when you refer to creating that relationship between herbivore and grassland, and wanting to sort of not just let this whole place go to shit, because we've seen friends do that with pieces of land they've bought, and it's just something I'm very not keen to do, and then sort of try and turn up in 4 years' time and think, well, where do we start? And so we're looking at different options. You know, if we could find someone with who was prepared, who had some electric fencing and just wanted some land and, you know, some movable infrastructure, if they were up for doing that, that would be the ideal. But like, what's probably more realistic is if someone was to just set stock it for a short period of the year, whether that's more destructive than leaving it open.
Oh no, I would think I think the best possible outcome for you, if you're not going to be there, would be to fence it off. I think that would be a big point for you.
Yeah. You mean exclusion fence?
Exclusion fence. Yep. Because overgrazing will kill that property, and it already is. I mean, it's why all of those paddocks around you are dying, because they're being overgrazed with domesticated livestock, and then the coup de grace is the kangaroo.
Yeah.
So I think that exclusion fencing is a really big part of this. Can I just say as an aside that things like that, I don't know what you're doing with your finances, whether you're doing any borrowing or anything like that, but if you are, infrastructure such as that improves the capital value of the property, such that, like, say you were to go and do some of these things and then get a revaluation done, then that will raise your equity, right? Which is always something that, you know, has obvious benefits. So just bear that in mind. But so as an aside, but I think that best possible scenario would be get your fence up, and then if you can find someone in the valley who can come in with 500 sheep and just go on and off, that would be awesome.
Yes.
Now it wouldn't be set stocked; it'd be on and off, and that'd
be almost like planned grazing, but just with one paddock, isn't it?
Yes. Although, well, with the property being the size it is, it would probably be, and this is where it gets all funky on all of this, is that, you know, you'd probably, like 500 sheep, let's say it was next August, September, October, right? I don't know what, it depends on the season as to when you get the peak amount of grass on the property. But let's say it was those months, then, and you got, well, there's going to be X amount of forage on there. And I'm just pulling a figure saying 500 sheep. I don't even know what mob sizes people have got in the Muckleford Valley, right? Yeah, so this is where all the complexity comes in. But it might be more ideal that you had 3,000 sheep on there for one go, right? Yeah. But good luck on getting that number. Yeah. But that would be the ideal, would be in and out so that the whole property was eaten.
Yeah.
What is it, 80 acres? How many acres is it?
Oh, it's 80, but it's about 20 hectares of actual grazable land.
Right. But that's not all fenced out. So you can't actually isolate the animals at this point. And where I'm getting to is, if you haven't developed all of your fencing infrastructure and all of that, well, then you, in order to set it up properly so that you got the best possible outcome, you actually need to forward some of that infrastructure. If
forward
that makes sense.
Get going on it.
Get going on it, right?
Yeah.
So
I think that is actually our plan, is to get going on that stuff as soon as we've finalised the plan through doing the regrarium.
Well, that's right. I mean, say if you went with, so we've got earthworks and all that sort of stuff to do ultimately. But let's say that you're not ready for that, right? Yeah. But you do want to get the landscape moving. So you might put the fencing that goes below the main road, because that's what, you know, that's a fairly big division in this, is that we're putting a fence in which will go on that upper road that we've talked about, and that's going to more or less divide the top and bottom of the property, or the upper slope and the lower slope. Now, if that fence is put in, however it's configured, or whatever material is decided to be used, which is another conversation, then you can bang those, you know, 200, 300, 500 sheep in there for a week, and then get them off. And if it's only 20 or 30 acres, then that's probably going to work.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be optimal, but you could. I mean, your biggest objective there is to not have those sheep eat litter. We want them to basically do a job where they come in, graze that grass, get some nutrient cycling, get that all happening, and then get them off.
Yeah.
Get a bit of soil surface cover from their trampling, and then get them out of there. If you set stock for a longer period, then you will get a negative outcome, not a positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got to deal with local landholder, and what are they bringing to the table here? Because, of course, they'll have their opinions on how all of this should work.
Yeah.
Which is always interesting. There's quite a lot of farmers along the Muckleford Valley who make their money by selling land and pretend that they're successful property owners.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like what the farmer said to me who sold us the property.
Sorry?
I spoke to the old farmer. He said, "Yeah, I've got nothing to say about making money off this land." That's a great vote of confidence there.
Yeah. Well, that's probably quite reasonable, but that's an end result of generations of mismanagement in the first place. Because, I mean, the Muckleford Valley was famed. I mean, absolutely famous for its productivity, and it's just been continuously eroded of its value, and it's a horrible shame what's happened to it.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway,
I don't know if you know this. Just a sub point of what you're saying is that the bush aspect has already been fenced off by Connecting Country.
So I see.
That does break it up into its pasture area versus.
Oh, okay. Is that on the plan? Is that marked on the plan?
I'm not sure. It's not. Oh, it should be on Jemmy's plan.
We are. There you go. Got different plans, have we? Anyway, I hadn't heard that before, so I'd like to like to see where they positioned that and see how that fits in with some of the conversations I had that we've had in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it has implications for whether or not we actually do a rotation. I mean, a grazing plan inside that forested area. I suspect we won't. And
Why
it
is
also,
that?
why is that?
Yeah. Is there a covenant or something?
No, well, I mean, I don't know exactly what the ruling is, but I presume the fact that they fenced it just suggests that that was on the condition that we don't graze it. Is that not a reasonable?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. Oh yeah, Jemmy says it is marked. I must have just not paid attention to it.
That's okay. I thought it was, but
yeah, it's cool. And I hadn't heard about this. Well, this is a new point for me. I think around the what'd you say, connecting country? Is that the one?
Country is there's a sign on the gate that says connecting country, and we have.
So was that put in before you, or?
Yeah, that was before us, and we've been in contact with them to sort of see what their requirements are or specific.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. I would guess that grazing would be not allowed because, well,
it's also not. I mean, there's nothing there. There's unless
but that's not to say, and that's what I talked about. There's the absolute possibility that there can be something there. It's just, Central Victorian woodlands produce grass when they've been thinned. If they haven't been thinned, that's. I mean, I had a bloody monumental stoush with Bob Brown about this one day, the old Greens leader, because he came to Bendigo years ago to the town hall, and the candidate, as they always do, the Greens candidate had this thing where, we're going to stop firewood collection in the local bush. And I got up and I said, I just wanted to talk about the firewood collection thing. I said, you may not realise this, because I knew the guy who was the candidate. I knew he wasn't from Bendigo. He was come here in the last 20 years. I said, you probably don't realise this, but that some of the forests around Bendigo are some of the best examples of coppice and standards management that there is in the world. And because back in the day, what we used to have is state forest crews would go through and they'd do individual, so it was a permanent forest. They'd managed to keep all of the very best trees, and they never got felled for their value for their genetic value mainly. And so you've got those as the standards, and then you had the next one lower than that, which we use for saw logs and for other purposes. And then the rest of it was managed as coppice, which was the firewood supply for Bendigo.
Yeah.
And that's how it was. Now, mostly around Castlemaine, the management wasn't that good, but around Bendigo and the Wellsford, it was elite. It was as good as you get. Anyway, I made this point there, and then Bob said, I better take over because this guy's a forester. So I got labelled as a forester, right? And of course, Bob thinks that all eucalypt forests are the wet temperate forests of Tasmania, and that just doesn't have any idea about selective harvesting or what that can do, or in fact that there is a value, an ecosystem value, in having these wider spaced systems in place as well, with box ironbark grasslands, which there are, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think the Indigenous people manage ridges? And that's clearly in evidence, because you can see still, we're only 150, 170 years since they were here, with some of the most durable hardwood species in the world, and we've still got stumps. Like you'll go up onto your bush and you'll see some of the coppice regrowth coming out of and some of that coppice regrowth will be out of what was a tree that was originally 1 to 1.5 meters in diameter. Now, you don't get a 1.5 meter diameter tree with the next tree being 2 meters away. These are wide spaced forests. And wide-spaced forests have grass on the ground, because the Indigenous fellas, our brown brothers, were going and burning this stuff so that they could grow grass, so they could grow kangaroos. I mean, it's pretty damn obvious. But so I would contend, therefore, that one of the best land uses you could have, particularly given that you've got a grazing enterprise that you're trying to do. One of the best land uses you could have would be to open up that area and get the grazing going in there. It's certainly not going to be as productive as it is in the open areas, but it'll come along, and other species will join in. I mean, it's not as if you're going to exclude every native species there is.
Yeah.
It's not as if it's an anti-biodiversity strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but anyway, your classic, and I'm going to generalise, but your classic environmentalist type would disagree to the death on that.
Yeah,
because for them it's a paradigm of that humans and European species have absolutely no role to play whatsoever in native forest ecosystems. And yeah, if it was pristine, sure, but this has been fucked over so many times it's not funny. Let's get serious about this.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Anyway, so yeah, you find that out because I personally, if you're going to do what you set out to do on the number of acres that you've got potentially available, and try and do that commercially, yeah, good luck. It was tough enough on 80 acres, but if it's only 25 or whatever it is.
I meant 20 hectares. I couldn't calculate that.
20 hectares. But even so, 20 hectares is a really small amount of grazable area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you.
Look forward to hearing what connecting country allows and probably more so doesn't allow.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, mate. All the best.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're pretty good. Good session this morning. Thank you so much for all of your attendance in this 2.5 hour session. And I'll get this recorded, and I'll put it up straight away. I'll put the soils one up a bit late this week because I was travelling, so it's up as well. So we'll look forward to catching up with you throughout the day and over the coming. All right, all the best.